A lot of the people that we're talking to, they're talking about stacks, both physical and metaphorical, of scripts coming in and ideas from agents and managers in Hollywood being like, take a look at this one. They
Right.
have a big following.
Hey, everybody, and welcome to Here's the Scoop from NBC News. I'm Savannah Sellers, filling in for Yasmin Vasugian. Today on the show, the hunt for the next viral blockbuster is on. After horror movies like Backrooms and Obsession smashed box office records, Hollywood is trying to figure out how to replicate their success. Our correspondent breaks down the quote-unquote feeding frenzy. Plus, contradicting public statements, a catering cart, and a secret flight. We'll take you inside President Trump's covert departure from last month's NATO summit in Turkey. But first, rescue teams are frantically searching for survivors trapped in the rubble of collapsed buildings, hospitals, and schools after a 7.4 magnitude earthquake rocked Colombia Monday morning, the strongest to hit the country in more than a decade. Residents have been posting alarming footage of the damage, like this video showing a building collapsing in one of the western cities impacted the hardest by the earthquake. The death toll has now risen above 180 people and is expected to keep climbing as rescue efforts continue. For more on the devastation and relief efforts, I'm joined now by Richard Emblin, director of the City Paper Bogotá. Thanks for being here, Richard. For more on the devastation and relief efforts, I'm joined now by Richard Emblin, director of the City Paper Bogotá. Richard, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you very much, Savannah.
So, Richard, you are a few hours east of the epicenter of this. I know you're in Bogotá, but tell us your experience here. Did you feel this when it hit?
Absolutely. I was stepping out of my apartment. Colombians are early risers, and this is a big city of 12 million people, Bogotá. So people want to get to work early. The buses are packed, the bicycle lanes are full of runners and joggers and just people trying to get to work. And the morning shift usually starts here at 8. So this earthquake started at 7:34. I was actually walking to a cash machine, and all of a sudden I see people gazing up at the sky, and I could hear these sirens blaring from the mountains that surround Bogotá, where there are these kind of amps, and buildings have these amplifiers to make sure that people hear when there's an earthquake warning. But then I started seeing the bus stations rattle, and I started seeing the lampposts swaying. And basically, when I looked up, people were looking at the hills around Bogotá, where there's these giant kind of communications towers, and they were also swaying quite violently. And then my wife called me, and she was in a complete state of panic. And she was under the table in our studio. And I told her to keep calm. I keep calm, keep calm. And then I started walking back to the house. I did kind of a U-turn. And I said to myself, something big has happened in Colombia. This is big. And so, well, finally, when I got back home, people were out on the street, everybody. Buildings had just evacuated, people out in their pajamas. Everything was just, the whole city had turned out onto the street in Bogotá. And this is that it did not hit Bogotá.
Let's talk about where it did hit. Tell me what we know about some of the hardest hit cities.
Okay, well, the epicenter was on a very small town in a very rural community in the Pacific lowlands of Colombia called San José del Palmar. It is in a very impoverished part of the country, and a country that has been hit very hard by guerrilla activity, particularly by the National Liberation Army. So right now, the two hardest hit cities in this tragedy is Pereira, which is very modern and its infrastructure, and Cali, quite far south, in the agricultural heartland of Colombia, sugarcane, rice plantations. That has been very hit too. Now, rescue teams have been working tirelessly over the night, both in Pereira, in all the hardest hit regions, taking people out of rubble. And the Colombian response, its emergency response unit is very efficient. And unlike other countries in Latin America, the government allocates, and is very correct in this way, regardless of the political tendency of each government, to invest heavily in its emergency response unit. So we have the civil defense guards, we have the fire departments, we have the first responders, the canine teams. So they've all been dispatched. And in actual fact, Bogotá has already sent 60 specialized search and rescue teams to Pereira and Cali. And immediately the presidency and its entire ministry is out there in the zone. So they've kind of split. The president's in Cali, the vice president is in Pereira. There's a whole shuffling going on of the cabinet to make sure that there's a presence of the national government in every city, so that things, whatever is needed can be met, or whatever need the population has right now will be met by the national government. And of course, the Colombians are rallying behind this. Their solidarity campaigns, people are donating now. And unlike other earthquakes we saw in Venezuela a year and a half or a month and a half ago, we're not stymied in bureaucracy. And it's to get people saved.
It's also notable to me hearing you speak so positively of the government's response, because you've just had something notable happen. You just had a new president sworn in on Friday, right? It seems that the response has continued to be seamless.
Yes, Abelardo del Espray, when he was sworn in on Friday, he made it very clear that his government starts now, and they will all work tirelessly 24/7 for the country, that there will be no long breaks, no major international trips scheduled, that they have to balance the budget, they have to get their fiscal deficit back on track, they have to start getting back into action. And I think this is essentially Friday. This was a long weekend in Colombia, and Monday, when this happened at 7:34, it was really his first working day as president of Colombia. Colombians, it's been a polarized election, but on the other hand, when it comes to helping others, and in a country so afflicted by an internal conflict, it's almost an oxymoron, or very ironic, that we have these kind of warring factions, illegal armed groups. Yet when there is a tragedy, everybody sets aside their differences and comes to work for the benefit of the greater good.
As we often see after a tragedy like this, you are receiving international aid. In fact, from the United States, the State Department had just said on Monday on X that the U.S. is committing $15.5 million in aid. We also have the global nonprofit group, the International Rescue Committee, on the ground there. How much of a difference does this assistance from outside the country make?
It will go directly to emergency response, immediate emergency response, getting supplies, necessary supplies into the region, into the hardest hit territories. But Colombia's not clamoring right now for international money assistance. It's not going out there saying, guys, we have no money, please help us out. In actual fact, quite the opposite. And so I think it's very welcome, the State Department's generosity, but that's not really what the Colombian government is looking for right now. We need the immediate reaction of the Colombian government is calling for Colombians to donate blood, blankets, non-perishable goods, canned goods, water, because and basically household supplies that can keep people warm at night. So this is an immediate urgency, or an immediate need, but also to get more high qualified Colombian doctors, nurses, and the whole medical staff on the ground immediately to save as many lives as possible in the next couple of hours who were rescued last night from the rubble.
Richard Emblin, thank you so much for joining us and your insights here. We really appreciate it.
Well, thank you for having me, Savannah.
We are learning some pretty stunning details about President Trump's trip home from the NATO summit in Turkey last month. It turns out President Trump took a secret flight home on a different plane than the one he boarded in public view. The story was first reported by the Washington Post. The elaborate plot came amid security concerns over the war with Iran raging just over the Turkish border. That's according to a U.S. official with knowledge of the plan. Well, the operation was kept secret even from members of the press corps who regularly travel with President Trump, including NBC News White House correspondent Monica Alba, who was on that trip to Turkey but was not slated to travel home with the president. Hi, Monica. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Monica, you actually joined the podcast from the NATO summit when you were there traveling with the president, like I just mentioned. At the time, the president announced that he wouldn't be flying on this new Air Force One that was this gift, that he would be instead going on the old Air Force One. At the time, you actually told Yasmin, the host of this podcast, that you thought it was bizarre. So there were signs that something was going on. Take us back to that day when that information was revealed and started to unfold.
It's true. I mean, this job, Savannah, a lot of it is, of course, our basic journalism fundamentals, great writing, good news judgment, all the things you have to do to get a story out and to viewers. But a big part of being a White House correspondent, honestly, is vibes. It is your sort of spidey sense of something feels a little bit amiss. This doesn't add up. This doesn't match what they said yesterday. Why are they doing this now? And that was totally the case when this happened more than a month ago while we were there in Turkey. We learned about this from the president himself. He had announced on social media that, quote, for old time's sake, he wanted to take the old Air Force One instead of the newly retrofitted Qatari donated jet back to a UK airbase. And that made everybody go, what? Why would he be doing that? That didn't really even seem to make sense at the time. But what we did know through our reporting was that there were these security concerns. And out of an abundance of caution, the president, since he had just ordered new strikes on Iran while he was in Turkey, neighboring the country of Iran, that there was some anxiety about that. And so we were told, out of an abundance of caution, that's why he was going to fly on the older Air Force One instead of the new one, because the new one potentially didn't have all of the same security features, which in and of itself was a huge story. Now we've learned he didn't fly on either of those planes because there was some kind of a threat that made them have to undertake this totally clandestine plan to basically smuggle him through a catering truck onto a different military aircraft in order to make this happen, all without the public certainly knowing, and with a very tiny, tiny group of even the president's closest aides knowing for a while.
But Monica, tell us a little bit more about what we know right now about this like choreography of what went on, because what also makes it such a bombshell is that we saw the president both get on and off the plane they said he flew on, though he did not.
That is why it is also bananas. And that is why journalists travel with the president. They set up a shot with a camera underneath the wing of the plane whenever the president is going to be boarding and getting off the plane. That is a basic function of what we are there to do, to document that. What time did he board? Who was he with? And so the fact that they did go through all of those motions, they showed the president boarding the old Air Force One. The pool got on the plane. And at the time, the press reporters, that's what's known as the traveling pool, didn't know that he was exiting through that catering truck that you can see on some of the pool video. You can see the catering truck on the other side of the plane come down and roll over to the direction of this other U.S. military aircraft that's sitting on the tarmac. And the reason that that didn't raise as many red flags at the time is that there's always a support plane, and it usually looks like that. But what we know now is that it was the president who got onto that C-32. And then, as you noted, the thing that's even more mind-blowing, when they landed in the UK, they somehow got the president off of that third military aircraft and again secretly got him back onto the old Air Force One so that he could deplane and the pool reporters and the cameras could capture him coming off the plane so as not to raise any eyebrows about whether he was on that plane or not. The journalists thought he was, and that is what they reported in real time because they thought it was true when it was very much not.
Monica, also explain, as somebody who has traveled with the president, how it's possible that journalists could have been on the plane and thought the president was on it when in fact he wasn't, because he's not like sitting next to them.
That's right. And it's kind of this interesting situation because actually on the new Air Force One, they just changed the layout a little bit. But they were on the old Air Force One where reporters sit in their own little press cabin that's actually in the rear on the right-hand side of the plane, cordoned off with a curtain that kind of opens and closes, but you wouldn't necessarily see the president unless he comes back and talks on the plane, which for this president is a very common occurrence. He often gaggles on the plane. And in fact, he gaggled on the second leg when it had landed back in the UK from the UK to Joint Base Andrews when they get back on the new plane. And he even answers questions about some of the security measures that they took on the plane, which was the aides asked the reporters to lower all of their window shades. Now, that is not unprecedented. That is something that happens when you're traveling with the president, and let's say he's going on a secret trip in the middle of the night to a war zone. We've seen that with all of the recent presidents. When former President Biden did a secret trip to Ukraine, that was the case. When former President Bush would travel into a war zone, that was the case. So the window shades being lowered was also an indication of how strange this was, but we assumed that that was just related to some of these security issues that had forced the plane switch in the first place.
So, Monica, you just mentioned how President Trump was talking about this, and we do have some sound we want to play. He was asked at the time if he was aware of a credible threat from Iran, essentially what in theory kicked this whole thing off. He said, quote, all the time.
I'm number one on their list before you. But if I go, you go. Right?
What was there a
So
specific
perhaps someday want to change professions.
So what's of note there, Monica, right, is that while the president did switch planes, staff, journalists, they remained on this plane that was apparently of concern. What do we know right now just about how intense the threat was against the president? Do we have any information in that regard?
We don't have enough of a clear picture of this, and I think that's a really important target for us to try to get more information about this, because clearly the threat was of such a level of concern that they had to undergo this super secret plan. But we don't know if this was a very specific or even credible threat in terms of what kind of intelligence it was, whether it was specific to this flight, whether it was more general, whether it was broader, and they thought, again, out of an abundance of caution, that they should take this really extraordinary measure. But we do know that overall, there has been an increased threat assessment on this president because of the war against Iran. Iran has been pretty clear about that as well in their public statements and some of the threats that they make against the American president. But we should also point out this is a president for whom threats against him are actually at a very high point overall, and he is often talking about that. He's the one sometimes revealing these details about new intel that they've shown him that have put him on these lists that he says means he's a target for assassination. So many of those details we're learning from him directly, but we don't know the exact specifics of this case.
Monica, fascinating conversation with a bombshell of a report today. We thank you for joining us on it.
Always great to chat with you. Thanks, Savannah.
This summer's breakout horror blockbusters, Obsession and Backrooms, have a few things in common. They were made by YouTubers in their 20s on basically shoestring budgets, and both won big at the box office, raking in more than $870 million worldwide. That has set off a scramble inside Hollywood to try and follow their playbook. And our NBC News entertainment correspondent Chloe Melas has been reporting on this. She joins us now. Hey, Chloe.
Hey, Savannah.
I just love this conversation because what a thing to just sort of rock the movie industry in such an interesting way. So first, just let's talk about how the success of these horror movies kind of changed the game inside Hollywood. Like, how has it impacted deals that are actually getting signed?
I mean, it's actually totally crazy, Savannah, because first of all, it's the phenomenon that none of us saw coming. I mean, I just want to say, Curry Barker, guess how much it costs to make Obsession? $750,000. Okay. The ROI on that is just totally insane. Kane Parsons with Backrooms, a bigger budget by several million, $10 million budget, but in its first weekend opening to 80 million, I mean, yes, the numbers, they don't lie. So to your point, Savannah, there is this scramble to try to find the next kind of like one-hit wonder. Not that these guys are, but you've seen this in the past with like the Blair Witch Project, or do you remember the horror movie Saw? It prompted years of these like low budget horror flicks, and it didn't always mean success at the box office. But when you look at some of the things that have been greenlit in the wake of the success, let me rattle a few of them off. So Amazon MGM, they actually recently secured the film rights to a YouTube horror series called The Mandela Catalog. And there was a 5-studio bidding war with Steven Spielberg's Emblin Entertainment among the producers. Warner Brothers, they have acquired something really scary that my kids are less scared of now, but used to be so scared of when they were toddlers, called Siren Head. Do you know Siren Head?
I've heard of it, yes.
Siren Head is really scary, and this like became a thing on the internet, like internet folklore, and Warner Brothers acquired it, right? And then obviously Barker, we know that he has his follow-up film Anything But Ghosts, so we'll see. And A24 has already tapped him to helm the next reimagining of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
But Chloe, is the thing here really about the fact that they have this internet lore and therefore following? Or is it also just that they're doing things for cheap because they're not these like big fancy people with big fancy budgets with big fancy actresses who need to be paid a bunch of money? Like, is it just the internet following or is it the cheapness of it?
The bigger thing is the internet following. When you have Curry Barker and Kane Parsons, they had a devoted group of people that had
Right.
known them for years. And that's the same thing for Markiplier and Iron Lung that saw success. It's not necessarily that you need like a low budget price tag. And obviously, that is what worked for Curry Barker because it's totally insane that he only had $750,000 to make that movie and it's done so crazy well. But I think it's also the fact that, again, it's not just YouTube. It is Reddit, it's podcasts, it's other interactive platforms that have these loyal audiences. We are in the era of the creator. I mean, you know, Savannah, you started on Snapchat. Look at you now. You are world
Oh, yeah.
famous. Okay.
Huh.
But seriously, like you're going to see a lot more of that. And I think in Hollywood. So you don't need to spend crazy money to make money at the movies anymore. But it doesn't mean that you're not going to see the Spielbergs and the Christopher Nolans of the world continue to put out these big blockbusters that cost a lot of money. And I think that the story is still being written. I think over the next 6 to 9 months, let's see what gets greenlit because a lot of the people that we're talking to, they're talking about stacks, both physical and metaphorical, of scripts coming in and ideas from agents and managers in Hollywood being like, take a look at this one. They
Right.
have a big following. So all I know based on our reporting though, Savannah, is that there is a frenzy. People want to replicate the success. It's just hard sometimes.
Is it lightning in a bottle? Can you keep catching it? We'll find out.
Hey, I like that. Yes.
Chloe, love this reporting, love this conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
That's going to do it for us at Here's the Scoop from NBC News. I'm Savannah Sellers, filling in for Yasmin Vasugian. We will be back tomorrow with whatever the day may bring. If you like what you heard, please press the subscribe button. We'll see you tomorrow.
We thank you for watching, and remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or watch live on our YouTube channel.